What can I even say about this game that hasn't already been said? Nothing, because this isn't a review. I've always been fascinated with the game's development, and all the stuff that got changed and cut while it was being made. Sometimes the things left out turn out to be more interesting than the game itself, but other times things are better left unfinished. With Mario 64 though, it's one of the few games that has had a radically different tone during development. It's also one of the few games that manages to stay relevant in terms of beta and development stuff. I'm pretty sure you guys know what I'm talking about. So, I've always wanted to make a series like this, like looking back at how did we kind of get to this point that we are now. All the stuff that changed, what's going on behind the scenes, all that stuff. And I feel like there's no better game to start a series like that with than a game that got me into this field of research to begin with. Field of research. So in this video, I'm going to talk about all the stuff behind the scenes, what went into actually making the game, the secrets and everything else. Just to answer the question, how did we get here? That was the worst intro. What the fuck am I doing? Mario 64 began development back in 1994. At this time, the Ultra 64 was still being created behind closed doors as the Super Nintendo's successor. With some help from Silicon Graphics, Ultra 64 Mario Brothers, as it was called at the time, was finally ready to get started. Like most things in life, you need a rough concept of what to implement, maybe some sketches, or maybe just a general idea of what to do. For example, this. Can't tell me it's not concept art, right? I mean, thankfully for Mario 64, we at least got one piece of paper that showed it, even if Nintendo decided to cover up half of it with some Mario renders. Although the last three at the bottom are invisible, you can see a rough idea of the many elements that we're going to put in the game. Cladder liming, running away from boulders, flooding rooms, pendulum spinning, piano jumping, time bombs, climbing on gates, a wall dash, and spinning on a trapeze. What is that? Spinning around on a wire in a circle. A lot of these were actually either used in the game, used in other games, or just given to other characters entirely, like the wall dash was given to Wario. Three of the concepts here, mainly ladder climbing, wall climbing, and tightrope spinning, were actually used in Donkey Kong 94. Other things like the piano jumping were used in 3D Land and the Ghost Houses, and the changing of water height and levels ended up being used in Wet Dry World. Besides concept art, there were other ideas being thrown around development. For example, Yoshi was going to be a major part in the game, being used in levels. Another major concept was going to be Luigi. As we all know, Luigi didn't make it into the game, but he did end up getting put into Mario 64 DS. However, not in the same state they were originally planning, as two players were going to be in the game from the start. Other ideas were motion capture animations for every action Mario would do, more enemies and levels, more characters, and even just whole levels in general. Another thing was the Mario head in the intro being taken from an actual different project. That Mario head would end up being used in Mario Teaches Typing, along with various real-time sort of demos from the 90s.
Daniel lost all the money at the bar last night. He drank it all up.
Just from these concepts alone, you can tell that Mario 64 was going to be their biggest game. And while we don't get to see much of actually what's going on behind the scenes behind these concept images, it wouldn't take long for us to actually get a whole taste of it. Mario 64 was shown off for the first time to the public, and Jesus. Now I know you can't be too critical on a game that's only 50% complete, but just at a quick glance, you can still see that underneath all the textures, it's still Mario. Even if everything ended up looking a bit more cartoony, you can still tell that everything was basically set in stone, even at this point in development. So before we go in and talk about what was going on in this build, I want to give a little disclaimer about what I'm going to show here. All the footage I'm going to be using for this part of the video is going to be sourced from 64 history along with other clips that they have of this build. I will have linked in the description and also a little watermark showing where it's from in the top corner. I would capture my own footage from ROM hacks trying to recreate or mimic the feel of these versions of the game, but half of the time they're either not good, not public, leaked out, or stolen textures. So yeah. So with that all done, let's dive into the next part of the video, talking about the Shoshinkai build. Space World. So after getting a chance to play with Mario's face for the first time, you're dropped into the grounds in front of Peach's castle. You can see all of its Italianness into one little polygonal mesh. After that camera trick, a message shows up that reads,
"Welcome to Mario. If you're the adventurous sort, pay a visit to the castle ahead."
Okay, it wasn't the best read, but I mean, if you end up hearing this take, then it's safe to assume I wasn't able to get somebody to read it for me. I'm not sorry. I am sorry. There isn't much footage of the castle grounds outside of running towards the castle in every build, but from an overhead shot taken from a build about a couple weeks prior, you can see there's a path that stretches behind the castle. Just thought it was worth mentioning here. Anyway, after making your way into the castle, right off the bat you're already hit with something that's kind of similar, but not totally similar. Cut that didn't make any sense. Anyway, after making your way inside the castle and fiddling around with the controls, you're hit with a completely different layout. The doors to Jolly Roger Bay and Ballon Battlefield are basically in the same position. But notice how there isn't a star door to go to Bowser in the Dark World. There's no door to the secret slide, and there's no stairs at all. The whole castle has more of a nighttime feeling rather than the daytime in the final game. Rather than putting textures of guardrails on the stairs, they actually modeled in some walls with little red tops on it. Of course, the final version of this castle looks a lot friendlier than the version in here. I still want to play this version, and I'm pretty sure everybody else wants to as well. I mean, there's plenty of remakes of this, but like, come on. Have you seen the wiki pages for these things? No, I can't go into every minute difference here, but there's a lot of footage you can watch for yourself in the background or in the actual channels listed below that show a lot of in-depth changes about this castle. But to be fair, we're not going to be spending a lot of time in here because it's just a small hub world. All the castle doors are unlocked and numbered from 1 to 4. But if you want to jump right into the levels without taking a couple seconds to walk, just press start and it brings up as a level select. I'm going to be using this as a guide, so let's make our way down the list. Starting with, Whomp's Fortress is the first level on this list, and it feels right at home as a demo level. With Ballon Battlefield being the start level in the final game, you can tell that Whomp's Fortress was really made at a different time of development. The level is basically finished aside from a few key details. The skybox is more overcast and has a purple tint to it. Grass is a bit more teal in the final version. The dirt looks dirtier. The usual enemies are seen here: piranha plants, thwomps, etc. Even the owl is here too, but it isn't as reliable as the final version, considering there's no platforms floating around. After making your way up to the top and passing some funny looking whomps, instead of meeting the Whomp King face to face, you'll just see the tower. You also get to see the bullet bills, and they're just as useless as they are in the final game. Hell, even the tower looks different here, with some giant looking platforms to step on. Even the star looks different, being pre-rendered instead of actually having a model. The star ended up being used in the final game as the 2 red and silver stars that you see on the title screen. Alright, I know I haven't talked about it yet, but I feel like we should address it here since this is the actual first level you'll be playing where you can experience platforming. Mario's voice is... well, it's not Charles. The voice clips here actually originate from the Voice Spectral sample CDs of Byte Best Service, which I happen to have thanks to a friend. Clips used for Mario were actually found within the Gigaleak in high uncompressed quality, along with the sound for the coins as well. I won't go into every sound change, but if you want to read up on it for yourself, I'll leave the article I used by the cutting room floor for the description, as it's been a great use for this video. Next up is Lethal Lava Land. Like Whomp's Fortress, the stage was basically finished. The volcano is here, the bullies are here, albeit with a different design. The sliding puzzle is here, but without any red coins, and a majority of the textures are basically finalized. The only major difference here is that certain sections of the level have not been implemented yet, and the level has a bit of a more flat feeling. Mario's starting position is on the opposite side of the arch that you start from, so instead of being on the left, you're on the right. This little starting platform was left in the final game, and ended up becoming used for the spot where you can get the green shell and later stars. The star for beating the big bully is just out in the open. The falling floor used after the bully is beaten in the final game is still here, but it's the only real challenge to actually get to it. Anything that doesn't relate to the main level of geometry has also not been added. The last major difference is even though the volcano is present, there's no internal level inside of it, so if you just jump in, you'll just get burned. Speaking of getting burned, Blarg, you remember this guy, right? From Mario World? He jumps out of the lava in that one stage and doesn't really do much damage? Okay, maybe he wasn't that famous, but there was a chance that Nintendo could have made him a lot more famous than he could have if they would have put him inside the game. By activating a few game short codes, you can actually add Blarg back into the final version, although in an unfinished state. His model has no textures and he only has one animation. Even if Nintendo couldn't really fix him up before release, at least Render 96 gave him a new home. Anyway, with that all out of the way, it's time to move on to the next level. Now, with a name like Snow Slider, only one thing should really come into your mind. Cool Mountain. I mean, it's a snow level and it has a slide. Case closed, right? Well... so this doesn't look like any Cool Mountain I've ever been to, and I've been to at least 2 of them. Snow Slider has a completely different layout than the final version. The mountain seems to be a lot more compact at the top of the stage, only giving you a baby penguin and a small cannon-like hole to jump into. So before we get to the hole, let's start with the level itself first. From the footage we have, Snow Slider is a lot more barren when it comes to detail. With something like Whomp's Fortress, you can tell that there's stuff going on, and it's all put into one little small sandbox to play around in. Snow Slider seems to be a lot of a vertical stage. So as you make your way to the bottom of the course, you'll be met with... oh god. Oh no. No, I can't. No, I can't. I got away from these guys. Okay, let's just grab the star and head back up to the top. So now we've seen the snow, but where's the slide? Well, let's hop into the cannon hole and find out. This looks familiar. So the slide in Tall Mountain actually comes from this level. Upon exiting, you're shot back at the level next to some Dire Docks. Again, another level that's more or less the same. Are you seeing a pattern here? Anyway, Dire Docks is one of the final full-length stages you can play in the demo. You start off falling from the ceiling into the center of the stage. After a couple minutes of swimming and dodging some water mines, you end up next to the sub, and the game starts to tank hard. Like, I know it was lagging in the vinyl version, but Jesus Christ, this is just like... Imagine trying to speedrun this version of the game. Now, I know you can't be too critical on a game that's only 50% complete. There isn't any real threat in this level, at least in the first tab, except for maybe the mines and the giant Cheep Cheep from Tiny Huge Island. Besides that, it's done. Alright, only one stage left to go. Now when you hear the word Mario, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Bowser, obviously. Choosing this level in the level select actually sends you straight to the Bowser fight. Comparing this to the final version, there isn't really much to say. I mean, the sky is blue, Mario lets out a funny scream when he gets burned. And the only real major change here is that when Bowser's defeated, he just kind of deflates and explodes out a bunch of coins and a star instead of a key. You can even reactivate the star in some Japanese versions of the game. Alright, I know I said there was one stage left, but that was kind of a lie. There's actually a lot more. Not much is really known about Jolly Roger Bay in the state, as it was only shown in some promotional footage for the actual event. We don't even know if this is actually Jolly Roger Bay, but it's safe to assume it is with a giant sunken ship and everything. Another level we saw in some promotional clips was this hallway. Now, nobody really knows if this is Big Boo's haunt, or a separate dungeon-like stage, but it is a level with Boo showing up in it. If anything, this could possibly be another part of the castle we never know about, so we only have this 1 second clip to go off of here. Hopefully one day the beta build leaks somewhere, and we'll be able to actually play this stuff. But you know what was found in the Gigaleak, however? So this clip's been around for a while, and it's only been one clip of Mario doing a sort of backflip in this stage. Nobody knows where it was, or if we would ever see this level ever again. Until July of 2020. Here it is! The first completely unused prototype level of Super Mario 64. Oh, sorry, hold on, let me zoom out a bit. Oh god. This absolute behemoth of a fucking stage contains some castle-like roofs, a staircase on the side, a moat with some water you can't really see, a bunch of rocks, and a weird blue stone at the top, which actually contains a star. This stage is genuinely really fun to play around in, and it'd make a really fun level to play in multiplayer. You can even see some unused textures, like the weird swamp-looking thing, some castle roofs, some weird metal crate, and even that stupid cobblestone picture that was everywhere. And while we're on the topic of found unused levels from this demo, how about this one? This stage was also found as part of the Gigaleak, and this is something we've actually never seen at all before. Internally it's called Donjon, so I'm just gonna call it that, I guess. So the scale of this stage is massive, which honestly doesn't kind of seem right. This looks like something that would be more suited for an actual hub world rather than a massive castle stage. Now the textures are a bit of a mess. If you look up at the ceiling in the yellow room, you can even see some sort of a symbol that's similar to the sun carpet in the final castle. Around the map, you can find places that look like giant paintings and stages, and even some paintings and textures that were used in the demo itself. There were also some other stages found in the leaks, but they were just, test maps and all that stuff. For now, let's move into 1996 and see what was going on with the game at that time. The first clip we see of Mario 64 from this time in development was seen in a demo for the 64's analog stick. This build shows off an almost finalized HUD and a now completed Bowser boss fight. Later on in March, more pictures were shown off. These pictures show off more rooms of the castle than before, including the aquariums and the mirror room, the latter in this case looking a bit more uncomfortable. In this build, we also get our first look of a bomb battlefield. Goombas actually appear for the first time and appear to have a slightly cuter design. That rhymed. Koopas are actually shown off here too, all being in the same picture showing the King's Mountain. However, do you see something different here? Not only is there a weird spike on the mountaintop, but the floating island was pushed over to a much higher off area. Personally, I think it makes more sense to have it on that location rather than right in front of you, since you can theoretically make it over there without having to actually use the cannon. Though most people who actually do that are fucking insane, so I wouldn't lose much sleep over it. Cool Mountain is shown here too, actually being recognizable for once. From these screenshots, you can tell that they were done, and the only thing they were really cleaning up here were just other objects rather than the actual level design. For the first time, we actually get to see Big Boo's haunt as well. The level seems to be incomplete in this build. With the exterior basically done, granted a few missing lights in a pitch black skybox, the interior only has one picture, but it's certainly one of the more interesting ones. Shifting Sandland is also here. Some of the geometry isn't really complete, but that can just be up to the camera being too far away. The metal grid that blocks off two parts of the level was originally just a brick texture, which looks a lot more awkward, but it was obviously just put there as a placeholder. The top of the pyramid looks more like a tiny house for the star rather than an actual triangle top. There's also this lovely picture of a Pokey. The final picture shown from this build at this time was Rainbow Ride. By the way, doesn't this picture look kind of familiar? And there's also this picture. Time to move on to the next build.
It's me, Mario!
It's now May of 1996, and at this year's E3, Nintendo shows off their still upcoming title. However, you can see from this clip that the game is basically finished. I'll try to point out all the notable stuff, but it might be a bit shorter than the Shoshinkai version. The title screen isn't quite done, but it is using the right fonts, and the trademark icon seems to be fully modeled rather than a sprite. The castle as a whole is basically finished, with the inside only having a minor change. The upstairs floor is missing some textures. The bomb battlefield is missing its red coins. That's it. Despite the thwomps using their older texture set, everything else is finished. Cool Mountain only has one new picture of it from the inside of the cottage on the top of the stage. Besides that, it looks pretty done, and why is he still here? Big Boo's haunt has a giant painting of a boo on the side of a wall rather than a small blue one. Hazy Maze Cave is actually present here, except that the main map is missing from the start of the level. You can also see the scuttle bugs have been finally added. We get to see a clip of Lethal Lava Land, and everything here is finished. There's not much really here to document, so if you want to read more in depth about it, the link for the article for this part of the game is still linked in the description. After a couple of delays, the game finally concluded development shortly after E3 96, releasing a month later on June 23rd. In Japan, at least. During that time, the game was actually revised behind the scenes for the American release, but I really don't have the energy to go into every little change. So when a game is being finalized for release in other countries, they usually have enough time to go back, fix some bugs, and cut out some files that they're not going to use to free up some memory space inside of the game. Though sometimes things usually slip through. Since Mario's the only playable character, he's going to have a lot of animations. A lot of the animations from Mario that weren't end up being used were just edits of existing ones. The bullies had a little animation from when they hit you, kicking up the little feets. Bips has an animation where he falls over, most likely being from when he was thrown. Piranha plants have a weird animation left over from an early demo where their teeth go to their lip, and Ukuki has one where he falls over. Found in the files for Lethal Lava Land exists this little flower. Obviously it wasn't meant for Lethal Lava Land. The texture itself looks like it would fit right in Lump's Fortress back in the earlier demos. It even has a little face on it. I don't trust that. Speaking of things you don't trust, Lakitu. You see him in the intro and he's the guy recording the whole thing, but he also mysteriously shows up and starts throwing fucking Spinies at me in different levels. Now usually the camera isn't really something that people like in the game, but I've never really had a complaint about it. Except for this one. In Shifting Sandland, there's a camera trigger that would have activated after touching all 4 pillars. It's supposed to zoom in on the top of the pyramid so you can see what's actually going on. Instead, Lakitu keeps the camera on Mario, making you really confused on what that sound is coming from. Of course, there's some other textures in here, like a texture from Bowser's eye from early build, some cracked ice that would have been in Snowman's Land, some early textures for Mario's eyes looking in a bunch of different directions, a metal wing cap texture, an honestly kind of creepy looking texture for a face on Lakitu's cloud, a texture for a chain, and a weird looking iron kind of texture. So remember we were talking about Yoshi earlier, and there's some stuff left over for when he was going to be a bigger part of the game? Well, here's one of those leftovers. I mean, honestly, one of the only leftovers, except for his model. This is a Yoshi egg. You can tell because it looks like one. So as stated earlier, Yoshi was originally going to have a much bigger role in the game, rather than just giving you a couple lives and a misspelled message before jumping off the roof. The sprite is obviously left over from that time in development, meaning Yoshi was at least somewhat far in development before his scrap. Remember that Boo image I was bitching about earlier? Well, here's it again, but specifically the key inside of it. So that model is actually still in the game, and actually has some different color variants, depending on what code you can put in. It also has a little texture for the HUD that you can add in, but it's wiped from the US version, replaced with a weird looking U in the European versions as well. There's some other things in here that I'll just blast by fast. A smaller version of the bullies in Snowman's Land, a trampoline model, a sound for the trapdoors that would have been activated. The model for the landmines and the earlier prototypes is still actually in the final game. And there's a version of the cab switch that's colored yellow, along with yellow boxes to go with it. Activating this would have allowed yellow boxes to actually become non-transparent. There's also objects for red and green shells that look a lot more simpler than the final version. And of course, the old penguin head. The early level select is still actually inside the game, but it doesn't seem to function. Alright, I know these aren't really the most interesting things, these are things people really know about. So let's get into the weird shit. We had to start off strong, so let's start off with the strongest model I have. Mario_old. So this Mario model is actually from the Space World demo. And the lighting code from that model is actually found in the prototype code for Mario Kart 64 that was found on Gigaleak as well. This model looks a lot similar to the final version, minus, you know, the pointier hair, and of course, the different lighting textures as well. Oh yeah, Luigi exists as well. He's real. If you were keeping up with all the data leak stuff that happened back in July of 2020, you know that Luigi was found, Luigi was real, and the model was actually painstakingly like reconstructed and brought back to life into the final game. And this is a completely like original model. This is clean. It's all finished, it's all there. There was also another Luigi model that seems to be a lot more detailed, where his mustache is actually painted onto the model, same with his buttons, and seems to have a lot more detail in his face, but no textures. An unused enemy called Motos was found in the data leak. So the files for this guy actually date all the way back to the build before Shoshinkai in October of 1995. So there isn't a set in stone name for it, but people just basically just call it Motos due to this internal name being Motos Man. So what this guy would do would pick up Mario, walk around, and just fucking launch the dude, like kind of similar to a Chuckya, but this dude has legs, and he looks like he could stab you. Chuckya would just kind of like topple over and maybe fall. This dude can kill you. Like, those are the eyes of a fucking menace. Speaking of a menace, Mips had an earlier model as well, where he's more pink, a lot more angular, but didn't have any textures on him. The earlier model from 1896 was also found as well. There's the Bullet Bill, the useless motherfucker, was actually found, called Killer. So I don't think he was only used once because he was inefficient. I think he was used once because he was too powerful. That's fucking scary. Speaking of scary, a Walker was found as well, basically being an early version of the Scuttlebug, and it looks like a rage face. It looks like the face from Gmod. Wallman was the name of an early Thwomp, and he has a giant eyebrows and weird looking face, and a honestly kind of smooth looking texture. I want a wall that looks like that. It's a Thwomp that was found in earlier demos of the game. It has a really funny looking face, and I kind of wish this design came back somehow. So as you heard before, the game originally started as Ultra 64 Mario Brothers. So at that point in time, the level select logo, where it was a bit simplified version of the Mario logo, has the word Ultra as well, in the same sort of styling. So implementing that back in, it says Ultra Mario rather than Super Mario. There's an earlier version of the bully model, which only has one horn, making it look closer to a chili bully. Now, I'm not sure if this is the same as the original bullies from the game, from the prototype, or if this is a big version, because the screenshot only shows a big version of the bully. Yoshi has an unused model, which is a lot earlier. It looks a lot more detailed than the final one. Peach also has one, where she actually has feet modeled underneath it. There's an early Koopa Troopa model as well, dated back to June 1995. So this is even earlier than the other ones, and this looks weird. Yet the shell and shoes actually go unused in the final version, and you can add them back in with the cheat code. Dokkan pipe, whatever. There's an early model of a pipe that looks more like an actual pipe than the weird cylinder model that we ended up getting, where it actually has an angle and a hole and everything, which is kind of cool, I guess. Ping, Jesus fucking Christ, that actually fucking scared me. The early penguin, I can't look at it. I can't. It's actually scaring me. Ping is the early version of the penguin seen in the Shoshinkai footage, the one I was screaming about earlier. And just, I can't look at it. I actually feel uncomfortable looking at it. Look at the eyes, dude. I know the whole joke, oh, it's a cognito hazard. I get that, but look, it's actually, I don't like it. It's properly creepy. I want like a 3D model of it. This one's weird. Hopper. No, this is a grasshopper enemy that was found. Nobody really knows what it is, if it was an enemy or like if it was like tiny or something. But it has animations from just sitting still and hopping. I think it was used for like more environmental stuff, and maybe having grasshoppers in the backyard, the courtyard, since you have birds in the front, have grasshoppers in the back. Early version of the chairs found in Big Boo's Haunt. It's an early version of the Wiggler model. Doesn't seem to have a picture on it, but this one has 3D body parts instead of 2D images. The cracked ice texture I was talking about earlier actually has a use in the Gigaleak, and it's used to like ground pound on top of it in that weird little maze thing to drop it right onto the actual star. Stage 1, or the castle stage I was talking about earlier, was found in the Gigaleak. Stage 2, which I didn't really mention because I didn't really have a purpose in the demo area. Testing out different kinds of terrain types and slopes. Stage 3, which is the Donjon map we talked about earlier. Stage 32, which is all the test map stages. And there's one that's just a blue area called IW Test, which is stage 37. But the graphics for it don't really make sense, so it only comes up as a blue thing. There's also a stage 38, with multiple versions, one of them testing out sand, and one testing out a mirror stage for Mario. Now here comes the actual unused sprites. So 1-player and 2-player icons were found in the Gigaleak, matching the same sort of font styling as the Shoshinkai build. The earlier star model I was talking about earlier, along with the collecting animation, along with the dotted outline version for a star that's already been collected. The original coin texture was found. Several different versions of trees were found, including one that's similar to the final build version, along with another tree that ended up being used in Mario Kart 64. So there's a texture for a flag that was seen in older versions of the game, mainly the Shoshinkai build. There's unused explosion and fire graphics that seem a lot more orangey, kind of bright. There's a graphic for a skull wipe animation for dying, similar to the skull you've seen at the end of the fake out path in the Tall Mountain slide, along with versions for Bowser that has little irises in it. There's a texture for the star that seems to be a lot longer and changes color halfway towards the bottom. The 1 through 4 textures from the early Shoshinkai build were found as well. The textures for Wallman, Dosun, the early Boo textures along with the one for the shark, the cursed penguin textures, and also a texture of the bird's eyes, Klepto, the one that holds the star in Shifting Sandland. There's textures for the inside of the castle, including checkerboard floors, a gray brick, and some brown bricks. The textures for the castle stage were found, including 2 versions of cobble_stone, my favorite. The levels for the test stage were found with a blue cobblestone texture and some weird orange one. Donjon textures were found with all the weird looking graphics, including some graphics from Whomp's Fortress from the Shoshinkai demo.
Bye-bye!
Deep inside one of the folders, there was a ROM file. Unfortunately, it wasn't a good one. It was just the Shindou version, but with English words instead of the original Japanese ones. This version of the Shindou release would end up actually being used in 3D All-Stars. I would say that's basically it, except there's still one more version of the game I need to talk about. The disk drive version. So this version of the game was actually shown off in the Shoshinkai 1996 event that Nintendo was at, where they showed a disk drive version of the game for the 64 disk drive. I'm just gonna call it DD or whatever. Now this version of the game was the original ported over onto the actual disc and wasn't found for a while until somebody found it in like a thrift store or something. As you can tell, I'm being a lot more off the cuff at this part because I've already got all the actual major stuff out of the way. So Hard for Games actually made a video going into the game and showing and play. I think they played it up to around the point where the game just crashes, because you're not going to play the entire game if it's just an early disc port. But there's also some stuff still unused inside the game itself, and that being mostly just developer text and cheat codes. There's some unused pictures, like one of a developer that nobody really knows. Audio differences where the music sounds a bit different, the sound effects sound kind of weird, and that's about it. Well, that was the longest thing I've ever had to write in my life. That hurt my throat, and I did it all in one take, in one sitting. Well, not one take, obviously. I've been recording this for almost about 2 hours, and I had to cut out a lot. My mic was messing up during half of it, so I had to re-record lines. My throat hurts, this chair hurts. But I feel like it was worth it. I mean, I just wanted to talk about a game I really like, and I feel like I did a good enough job. Even if I did kind of give up halfway towards the end. Some of it wasn't kind of that funny. I kind of broke my throat yelling. So, that's basically it. I want to give a special thanks to the people of a specific server that I can't really mention for helping me with trying to compile some builds of the game for some footage, like the castle one and Donjon and all that other stuff, along with a lot of the community just trying to remake the game in these earlier builds. Preservation Project is mainly the only one I can really trust, that and Gamma 64, which I might have probably used some footage here and then. This is before I've recorded any footage of that, but I'm probably gonna leave this in. I don't really care. The cutting room floor was my main source of information here. Massive props to everybody who submitted stuff into the cutting room floor article, and for hopefully not getting mad at me or putting it in this kind of format where people can just listen to it even if it's not the entire thing. I'll leave multiple links. I want to give thanks to a friend of mine, Rad Shy Guy, for looking at the script for about 5 minutes before he started playing Duck Game. My girlfriend, she saw it for about a couple minutes. All the music in the video you heard, all the remixes were made by me, using some samples a friend gave me of higher quality samples from the actual game, found by the Render 96 crew as well, so they're great. There's a lot of people to thank, but mainly those guys. So, and thank you as well for if you made it this far somehow and managed to withstand my shitty voice and my also really shitty writing and mic. I mean, I'm planning on making a video style like this for mainly the Sonic games, because I know those like the back of my hand, because I got that virgin brain. Probably Super Mario World as well. Maybe more music. Maybe I'll upload some of the remixes from the videos I do onto here. It'll be on and off usually. I don't really have the time sometimes. But yeah, alright, next video most likely going to be Sonic 1. But besides that, thank you for watching. Go check out the links below. Alright, bye.